Hello, everyone. Welcome to the A Train to Sedona. I'm Linda Marsanico. The A Train to Sedona is also the name of a book I wrote, a memoir about my journey to love and compassion. I wrote it to have my voice be heard, but also, importantly, in the hopes that my journey will inspire yours. You can buy a signed copy of the A Train to Sedona on my website, lindamarsanico.com, on Buy the Book page. You can get an unsigned copy at retail and bookstores. If you'd like to read the first seven pages for free, you can go on Amazon.com. I also have a free gift for you. It's called the Cheat Sheet for High Vibration Living. 7 tips to keep your energy focused in the present moment. It's so important to have in your toolkit at this time, which is so unpredictable. And you can download that on my website at lindamarsanico.com. I'd like you to hop on board to the show. I do have 2 disclaimers. The broadcast does not establish a professional relationship. And number 2, that the opinions expressed here do not represent Talk Radio New York City. Today, my guest is Frank Harrison. Frank R. Harrison is a passionate executive and healthcare advocate with 30-plus years of experience spanning the financial services, entertainment, and new media industries. For the last 3.5 years, he has become focused on healthcare as a mission, utilizing all of his experience to become a leader to the audience he reaches over multiple channels. Frank's education spans top-notch institutions that have provided the foundation for entrepreneurship. He has learned from top-notch institutions, as I've mentioned. I haven't mentioned them yet. Brooklyn Technical High School, New York University, Fordham University. He has learned from these fine institutions and has achieved a certification as a public health advocate through Cornell University in conjunction with the New York State Department of Health. The most recent accolade was achieved during the COVID-19 pandemic, and he has been able to put this work to use on his podcast, Frank About Health, which we'll talk more about in the broadcast. Currently, Frank is channeling his expertise and passions into filmmaking, content production, and developing medical education programs. He is working towards releasing a documentary this year, aiming to leverage his diverse experiences and insights to create a compelling narrative that resonates with a wide audience. This project is an extension of his career and a testament to his lifelong commitment to learning, innovation, and making a meaningful difference. Frank, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Linda. And then, like when you were first on Frank About Health, I was bringing you into the talkradio.nyc family, which it truly, especially as that time has passed and you've grown with the show and I've been watching and I see all the spiritual guidance that you provide. It's been inspiring to me. And especially now, as I've been going through some challenges and had to take a hiatus longer than I'd planned, we've come full circle. You're bringing me back into the family, which I already know is there, but I actually miss everybody, because I can't believe that the last show that I did was in November, and here it is already March, December, January, February. That's 4 months. I was planning on coming back in February, but life has other plans, or life happens while you're making other plans. A quote from
Yes.
John Lennon, by the way, you know. So I'm just grateful that before I do come back, which like you said, we'll talk about later, I'm grateful I'm able to warm up again by being with you today.
Well, you certainly warmed me up on the Thursday before my October 23 introduction, a sort of trial by fire, never hosting anything like radio before. So we
Yeah,
can thank each other.
exactly.
So, my first question, Frank,
Sure.
is when you think back to your childhood and adolescence, those influences, how do they bring you to where you are today?
Wow. Well, in my childhood and adolescence, that would be 13 through 18. I consider that prior to college.
Hmm.
So, and actually I entered when I was 17. So let's just say 13 through 17. Um, I was a bookworm. As you said, I was at Brooklyn Technical High School. I was in a very comprehensive major. They had a concentrations for high school students in that high school. It was called the Math Science Institute. I was doing calculus when I was 15.
Mm.
I was aiming for, I don't know, maybe just perfect Regents exam scores or maybe just to be the math whiz. I really didn't have a goal in mind other than to be as perfect as I seemed to be on my exams and in all of the math that I had taken way before my time. So I guess the inspiration was knowledge of my own talents and in my brain. I knew I was highly analytical,
Hmm.
so that would be one thing. However, another aspect is that during that high pressure season in my adolescence,
Hmm.
I had a love of music. So
Hmm.
I would do impersonations of 80s artists at the time. I do a massive impersonation of Michael Jackson. I used to be paid for doing it, you know.
Whoa.
And believe it or not, I would do them on a moving N train across the Brooklyn Bridge after school, and I would be getting paid. I would be doing Michael Jackson's Billie Jean. I would be doing, at that point, there was an 80s band named Culture Club, and I
Yes.
would be impersonating, I don't know, I think the song was I'll Tumble For Ya. There was Madonna, but I would be impersonating Madonna herself. I would just be, impersonating the particular dances or stuff like that. So first you have my analytic mind, then you have my love of music. And then I guess I'm burning the candle at both ends because while I was a junior at Brooklyn Tech, I developed my very first seizure. So I would have to say maybe that was divine intervention to slow me down, keep me focused, but at
Hmm.
the same time realize that my brain had a lot of power and I was probably overusing it. Doing all-nighters by studying constantly.
Yeah.
As I said, doing all these performances for entertainment and last minute cash if it was given. I didn't go looking for it, but simultaneously having the seizures to put me at rest. But it was interesting how the seizures made me not only take caution in everything I was doing, from my studying, from my dancing, from my working, um, it also made me look more inward and try to understand what was going on with me emotionally, psychologically, of course, neurologically.
Hmm.
And I guess I didn't really get to see all those components gel until I got to NYU. And in those 4 years, that's when I really began to understand what was my motivation in my life, my personal life, my professional life, stuff like that. But that's what they say. High school like gives you the toolkit, and when you go to college, that's when you put it together and create
Hmm.
hopefully the proper career path or something like that. So I was very simplistic about everything and chose business. So I ended up in business school and I knew I loved entertainment. So I did marketing. And because of my epilepsy, I minored in psychology. So I think what I'm really trying to say is that my adolescence motivated me to find a way to take my skills and not be mindless about it.
Hmm.
Just look at the events that were going on and try to carve out a path of what to follow. I don't think that I ever really set up like a vision board or
Hmm.
goals. I want to be this when I grow up. I want to do this. I want to do that. It was more of, okay, this is what I have. Let me see what I can do with it. And then everything that progressed and followed through was all, it seemed like it was provided to me, but in actuality, it was my actions that brought them to me. And I think overall, as I continue to move forward through life, I try to capture that knowledge of my personality and just say, okay, let's see what I have to do now
Hmm.
and work with it and map out at least a 6 month milestone chart or plan, a vision of how, if you don't achieve this, what will be your pivot. So I naturally developed, I guess, what would be dubbed entrepreneurial spirit or entrepreneurial thinking.
I'm also wondering if the epilepsy, the first seizure, enabled you to look inward and really start your spiritual journey, because the journey is inward.
Good question. I don't know if it made me start being spiritual, although I will say that I found myself saying after a seizure, and I used to have a lot of them. I mean, we're talking like one a month.
Mm.
All right. And that's pretty good considering other cases I've heard throughout the whole training that I later on pursued with epilepsy and research into human behavior. But that being said, I always would come out of a seizure and I would say, God, why did you do this again? What am I supposed to do now? The first word out of my mouth was God. So I guess instinctively, I knew there was a higher power at work. I
Mhm.
just didn't own it, or I didn't really recognize it as
Yeah.
clearly. I
Yes.
still thought I was in control, but I clearly wasn't if I was stopped with the seizures as I'm progressing with my work and with my desire to party.
What would you say the role of spirituality is in your life?
Especially recently, I would say the role is to listen more to my inner voice than the noise that I hear outside.
Mm.
And I've heard too much noise, too much noise, not just from family, but look at the media, all the noise that we get every day. I'm right now just watching 80s retro television to avoid the news. So that's
Mhm.
keeping me calm. And I'm
Yes.
listening to what my voice is saying. No, Frank, you don't want to watch this right now because it's going to make you nauseous, or something else.
I hear a lot of people saying that, and I do this myself, that I'm avoiding a lot of the noise, as you call it. If I look at the news, it's just to take a peek, but I don't dwell there. And I
Right.
dance around, I watch movies, I listen to music to keep myself calm. And all of the tips in my cheat sheet have that purpose to bring us to the present moment, breathing to relax, because we really need to be doing that.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, so overall, the real awakening, and I'm kind of quoting Sam there. That's the title of his book, Everyday Awakenings. The
Yes.
real awakening for me in terms of how I wanted to live my life in healthcare came through living with epilepsy, going through COVID, and watching family members get critically ill. And I guess similar to my high school experience, I would observe what I'm involved with and I would make something of it in terms of my podcast, Frank About Health, or in terms of any other type of business projects I got myself involved in after I graduated college. Although I did spend 10 years in the music industry first, so I got to live out that dream
What did
for a
you do
while.
in the music industry?
I worked for Sony Music Entertainment when it was a full-fledged company compared to what it is today. And it involved interaction with the international department, international artist development. I did soundtrack licensing. I worked with their record club, Columbia House. I did digital marketing with their
Mm.
websites. I tried to help integrate cdnow.com, which no longer exists, into the company with the management team and stuff like that. But my biggest windfall was when Titanic was released and Celine Dion was developed as an artist. And I was involved in watching all the screeners of that film 13 times before it was released to the public. So I could come up with the marketing plans for how her album and the companion soundtrack with that song My Heart Will Go On will
Oh,
get to the record club, get to the retail store, get to videos and all that stuff. And then that was my first year being invited to the Oscars as a result when she performed and won that year.
how
So
exciting.
again, that all evolved. It's an example how The role of spirituality in my life is following what is being laid out for me and not allowing the distractions of doing things because it's more secure or doing things because it'll give you more money. I'm not saying to be reckless with your life, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying
Mm-hmm.
to establish firm boundaries on who you are
Mm-hmm.
in extension to the rest of the people you're dealing with in your life, your family, friends, so forth and so on, well, colleagues as well, but also boundaries with you and I guess you could say your inner voice. I still believe we have a creator,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not very religious. Although I did have four godchildren, so I do believe in being a godfather, but I you won't find me at church every week.
I
Only
want to
special
say,
occasions.
I want to say that spirituality is one thing and religion is another.
Correct.
But it is
Correct.
time for a break. And when we come back,
Sure.
I'd like to talk about the motivation behind Frank About Health. What led you to want to have that as your focus on Talk Radio New York City? But now it's
Okay.
time for a commercial break.
Alrighty. See you in a few.
Yes.
Are you a conscious co creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the A Train to Sedona. I'm Linda Marsanico with my guest, Frank Harrison. As we continue, there are some comments. One is an anonymous one. Man, a documentary sounds cool. The person who edited has to be pretty awesome. And then the next one is a YouTube comment from my friend Gwendolyn Green Lindberg. Hey, you guys. Hey, Gwendolyn. Hey, everyone. So, my question to get back to what we were mentioning prior,
Mm-hmm.
what was the um, motivation for your beginning Frank About Health?
Well, the motivation was mutually created by myself and Sam Leibowitz. I wasn't interested in discussing all about health. I was more motivated to discussing epilepsy. Epilepsy, even prior to COVID, was still considered a stigma to have. Right
Mhm.
now, it's considered a hiccup. It's amazing how a pandemic completely did the change for me. So that would be one note I just wanted to make clear.
Yes.
And the reason is because being that it was a stigma at the time, I had been introduced to Sam by a mutual friend of ours. Um, and I was interested in doing what I can to rebuild my image because I had gone through ongoing seizures at the time. I had tried to build another business. It was called MedCash. And due to the seizures, the business fell through
Oh.
and it was depressing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the people that I was working with on that business had said, why don't you go ahead and revamp your social media image And then I was introduced to Sam to do a podcast. So I was going to call it Frank About Epilepsy.
Ah.
And he himself, he's a good marketer.
Mm-hmm.
He knew that if it's a stigma, how am I going to attract an audience?
Mm.
Right. But he didn't say it in those words, but that was a subtle message. It was call it Frank About Health. And then you can open up the window to talk about anything else that maybe I was going through. And being that I had just finished my master's degree in neuropsychology
Mm.
and did a whole thesis on the mental health attributes of epileptic patients, or even autistic patients, people on the spectrum rather.
Mm-hmm.
How are they impacted through depression or anxiety, or how does depression or anxiety impact their other disorder? Like, is the comorbid disorder the epilepsy, or is the comorbid disorder the mental health issue? So that opened up a new door
Mm.
by calling the show Frank About Health to not only discuss epilepsy, but to discuss mental and neurological health and its relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we did in 2016. That's when I actually first came to the network. We did, I think 20 shows. I'm not even sure, but my seizures were coming fast and furious. So I ended the series, and I also was working for Hilton Hotels at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended that job,
Mm.
and I spent a year away getting tested to see if cannabis was going to heal,
Mm-hmm.
but it didn't. I mean, it actually made me gain a lot of weight. So it actually stopped one of the types of seizures, but the other one continued. So I still take medication for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I'm rebuilding my life again in New York in 2018 at this point, my father is going through cancer, radiation, and stuff like that.
Mm.
So I was not doing well up here.
Yeah.
And to make matters even more worse, I mean, of course, cancer radiation and the treatment, I mean, it may have felt like a year, but it was 2 years or so. And then 2020 hits. 5 years ago today, in fact, New York was shut down, okay, for COVID-19. So the thing is that now I'm living with my father and mother,
Mm-hmm.
doing what I can as their healthcare proxy, but I can't leave the home to my other home, which has now been removed, right? So I'm quarantining with them, and then I get COVID.
Oh dear.
So I have to quarantine myself in my room
Mm.
because my father is rehabilitating from radiation. I don't want to be the reason why he dies. He gets COVID and that kills him. I mean,
Absolutely. Yes, yes.
so my mental health was tested. Obviously, I got COVID, so my entire system was tested. Believe it or not, I didn't have any seizures. So
Isn't
that
that
was in itself.
interesting?
Yeah. And then I did discover that there's no relationship between COVID and epilepsy. I mean, epilepsy is discharges, electrical discharges. It's not an organic illness like cancer or like a virus. So
Mm.
the thing is, whether that's a blessing, I don't know, but it gave me a lot of time to think. And then I reached out to Sam by email because now everything was on Zoom.
Yes.
And I think that was late 2020, early 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to come back and discuss COVID-19. And he said that, again, his marketing genius, they only know you as Frank About Health. So I debuted the show on May 21st, 2021, or the new version of it
Mm-hmm.
on Zoom, which you are now on. I mean, because I remember the time we were in his studio, we had
Oh,
microphones hanging down, phone in calls from your guests, stuff like that. But that's what the pandemic had done. It had changed all of our lives in different ways. But in my case, I would say that what we talked about in the previous segment, with the way that I'm faced with situations and now I'm left to my own devices to create, I don't know, opportunity or path forward or whatever. I truly was a health advocate for my parents
yes.
and now a big advocate for COVID. And my former employer, Hilton, wants to jump on board because they turned their hotels into essential worker hotels. So they're talking with me at long duration of times for being a potential sponsor, being a distributor, so forth and so on. So that's when I really had, I guess you could say, the muscle to come back to talkradio.nyc and really be a professional advocate. That's also by the, during the pandemic is when I got my certification from Cornell. So my career is forming in front of my very eyes. So I wanted to put it to work with the one person who knew me when it all began, which is back in 2016. And that was Sam and talkradio.nyc. And it definitely thus far had been a good 3.5 year run.
And Talk Radio New York City is such a lovely family. We have meetings every month, listeners, just so you know. And
Yes.
one
We have
host
one a week from today.
we do. Yeah. And it's a lovely group. We're all heart-centered and very supportive.
Yes.
I want to transition. We have a few minutes before our break, but I know that you've experienced a major loss of a dear friend.
Yes.
Are you wanting to talk about that? Share it
Oh,
with our
absolutely.
listeners?
I would have to say that, I mean, are we talking about that now or in the next section?
Well, which would you prefer?
Well, based on all that I have to say, I would prefer the next section because it might
Mhm.
take the whole amount of time. But
Okay.
I mean, maybe we have time now. I don't know. Do we have 2 minutes left yet, or are we
Well,
still good?
let's go with your desire. We can always begin this
Okay.
next session with the loss of your dear friend.
Okay.
Can you tell me how you see yourself being loving and compassionate?
Oh, that is a very deep question because I tend to think of myself as a caring, loving, giving person, and I'm very sensitive. However, I get tested a lot and sometimes by the wrong people. So as a result, when I get tested, I also tend to shut down. So in this particular case, how I consider this friend, Retha Gray, who
Yeah.
everyone at Talk Radio knows, and not to mention, she worked with Betty White, so she had a very big following on TikTok and,
Mm-hmm.
through her life in LA and stuff like that. But the way that we met, again, another circumstance that I never planned for. And she was literally advising me at all points in my career progression. I met her in 2013,
Oh.
and I first came to talk radio in 2016. Already, I had seen her doing podcasts, so she motivated me.
Mm-hmm.
But she was not the key inspiration, as I said. The key inspiration was trying to rebuild a business of mine that had fallen through. But I also did see that with the way technology was advancing, that was going to help me at least regain my core audience to revamp my business. And yet I would turn to her for advice because it was kind of like being in show business, but not so much, So she had the knowledge of how to be able to be the presence on my show and how to really engage with the audience and so forth and so on. So how do I see her as an example of love in my life? That was pretty much your question, right?
I asked, yeah, however you want to interpret it, how you are loving and compassionate. And you obviously attracted Erythrea. How do you pronounce her first name?
Retha,
Aretha.
Reatha,
Uh,
Retha. Aretha without the A.
so you attracted her into your life, which is
Yes,
part of the law of attraction. If I'm loving,
true,
I attract loving situations and loving people.
true. And so I would say that she was a model for me to understand that when you're fully connected to an individual, you get a sense of the quality of the way you love, and you transfer it out, hopefully, to your family and friends and other loved ones. Um, but you also begin to see a part of yourself in that other person.
Mm,
And I would have to say that other than other friends of mine and other family members who I do love, as I said, sometimes I get distracted by the noise or maybe even my own seizure activity that could be going on. I'm always having.
I don't know if anyone can hear me. We've lost some kind of power, but I'll take this opportunity to have a break. And we'll come back and talk about Retha Gray and her loss to Frank Harrison.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Hello, everyone. I'm Linda Marsanico. Welcome back to the A Train to Sedona. Now, we have experienced some technical difficulties. During the last part of the interview, Frank was frozen, although we could hear his voice, and our engineer, Jesse, is working all the problems out. So here I am, and I hope you can hear me. I want to say that I thought I would actually read something I think could be helpful from the A Train to Sedona. I have reflections at the end of every chapter, and this reflection is a very lovely one. It's on page 106. Yes, you need to be kind to yourself. Your self-talk developed from the attitudes of your childhood will need to be updated to reflect the person you wish to become. And so now I see Frank lively and healthily in front of me. And I thank you, Jess, for getting the bugs out, and we can continue with the A Train to Sedona more formally. So, Frank, I'm interested in hearing about the loss of Retha. Somehow, for some reason, I can't pronounce her name, so I'm not going to try.
Okay.
Please tell us about that loss. I know it was quite significant.
Okay, but before I do, if you don't mind my saying, did we already go to another commercial?
We did.
Okay, all
So
right.
we have a good 10, 13 minutes.
Okay. As I was saying before I froze out, is that thanks to knowing Retha, I learned how to integrate my love, compassion, and spirituality together. And I began to own the events and circumstances in my life more quickly, more productively, and to eliminate the noise around me so I can keep focus. That's why
Wow.
she was so dear to me. 12 years I've known her, but I felt like I knew her my whole life. So how can I tell you about her passing? First of all, my last show before I took my hiatus featured Retha, and it was right before the Thanksgiving holiday. And she had just won a Lifetime Achievement Award in Beverly Hills for all her humanitarian efforts. She also is a health advocate. She has worked with seniors who were in nursing homes. She has worked with homeless people. She had worked in missions. She went to Africa to feed the hungry. But at the same time, she was an actress and she was in commercials and she was doing movies and she had a TikTok series called Retirement House. And yet she also had the time to come on Frank About Health. She did 10 episodes with me. And as I was saying earlier, she was also one of my core inspirations for doing the podcast, even though, as I said, it was more driven by my epilepsy and my relationship with Sam and being guided how to rebuild my lost business model that fell apart back in 2014 or 15 or whenever that was. So my history prior to meeting Retha is I split everything. I did not see the big picture. But thanks to knowing her and relating with her, even though during the pandemic it was only on Zoom or she was 3,000 miles away, I I felt like I'd known her my whole life. So, how did I find out she died? Well, the irony is, I've been working on a documentary reflecting
Yes.
and documenting all about Frank About Health and what I'd been doing since the pandemic, so forth and so on. I was actually viewing it and I was watching the scene with Retha and Betty White chugging on glasses of wine, as it's a YouTube clip that a lot of people have been able to download. And I hear Betty White say, "We're going to live forever." And my phone all of a sudden lights up, and I'm getting a text from her husband telling me she had a stroke and a heart attack, and she's attached to a respirator in ICU at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. And I'm like, I'm floored.
Yes.
I'm out of my body
Yes.
because I'm literally watching
Mm.
right there her chugging with Betty White. "We're gonna live forever," and I'm getting this announcement. So meanwhile, I was also showing it to one of the individuals that is featured in the documentary, Maurice Elkovich, who's been a regular on Frank About Health,
Mhm.
and he's just talking to me his feedback, and I'm not really listening to him because I'm just saying, let's get over with this. I want to go and call her husband. So when I call her husband, I mean, of course, everything ends with the documentary. I say goodbye to him and
Mhm.
I call. He's telling me that we think she's going to recover. She just needs to be put on a respirator so we can, you know, they had to clean up her arteries or blockage, stuff like that. But I'm like now on walking on broken glass because I'm hearing she's still alive, but I have no access to her. I can't speak
Mhm.
to her.
Mm.
So at least eh, her husband,
Mhm.
is asking me who does she know in your circles that can come in. And Jose Dennis, who's my business partner, comes in and he prays because he also worked in, he was choir director for his church.
Ah.
So he leads a prayer group for her on the phone. She's hearing it from what I hear,
Oh,
from
I
what I
see.
understand. The whole
Yeah.
family's around. Her
Mm.
cousin, who worked with me and Retha on another documentary, another healthcare documentary back in 2013. And I'm literally giving my prayers and stuff like that. So you
Mm.
truly, that was a spiritual moment for me. Now, in terms of her going under renal failure, that was the end of her life. Okay. She asked through her advance directive to be pulled from the machines if they knew there was nothing they could do.
Yes.
So I knew, well, the whole family knew, and I knew she wanted to go. It's
Mhm.
not like there was nothing that they could do when she was helpless and saying, "No, please don't detach me." It wasn't as maudlin as one
Mhm.
could expect, especially when you don't see anything. You're just hearing it on the phone, right? But the thing is, the night before she died, actually, the night, I think it was after Christmas, going into New Year's. So pretty much 2 days after Christmas, I had a dream about her. She was wearing a fur coat and she was on a steamer train. Talk about the A train to Sedona. All right. The steamer train is pumping gas out and it's moving. And she's saying, "Take care, Frank. Everything's going to be cool." I woke up. I said, "But I know she's still alive." So I then speak to um, the pastor of my Jose Dennis's church, and he does a prayer for her. And when I told him the dream, he said, "She will be passing on, but she's going gladly. She's going very happily."
Mhm.
All right. And for some reason, I was calm about that. I didn't feel depressed or sad. So lo and behold, the day that she passed was New Year's Eve, 2 years to the day that Betty White passed.
Ooh.
So all those vibes and signals were
Mhm.
going through me. This is what
Mhm.
she wants.
Yes.
You probably want to, I make a joke, but I don't want to be lighthearted about it too much. But she wanted to go and meet Betty at the pearly gates. I mean,
Why not?
before 2025 comes in, let's go reunite. I mean, but I would say that what my joke is resonant of the moment she died. I felt it. I was eating a sandwich that I just ordered,
Mhm.
and I just dropped it. It was 8:01 p.m., New Year's Eve. I'm looking at my parents, and Jose came to visit because he's also a cook, so he wanted to make New Year's Eve goodies for all of us, and stuff like that. And he goes, "What's wrong? Why talk about karma? That very individual is calling me right now." So he must know that I'm talking about
Well,
him.
he picked up the vibe. There's a resonance. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So the thing is, though, at 8:01 p.m., I dropped the sandwich and I said, "Retha just passed." I didn't know that for a fact until at 8:30, her cousin calls me
Mm.
and said the time of death is 8:01 p.m.
It was her goodbye to you, Frank.
Yes. And literally between New Year's and about mid-January,
Mm.
I would be faced with questions about my cousin, because that's when the upheaval is going on, where she needs to be out of her house. She needs to be put into an ambulance and sent to the emergency room at Columbia Presbyterian because she's now wandering.
No.
She's completely out of control, and her own son, who's her caregiver, was not available. So there's now safety concerns. I'm getting call from our housing project saying that if you don't do anything, we're going to get adult protective services. And lo and behold, Retha, I feel Retha's voice.
Mm-hmm.
Frank, you know who to call. Your mother is the next of kin. You're only the cousin.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to get your mother involved to make the call, and you're the healthcare proxy. I literally, within it felt like a couple minutes, but within 30 seconds, I knew exactly how to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, what am I going to do? This is illegal. I can't do this. I'm only I
She came
felt
right
Retha.
in. Yeah. So that was a telepathic message from Aretha.
Yes, yes. And then lo and behold, her what do you call it? Her tribute to life service. She did not believe in funerals,
Mm-hmm.
and she was already cremated.
Mm-hmm.
So I was invited by her husband, as was Jose, because he's also a singer. He's a caregiver, he's a cook, he's a singer, and not to mention he's co-producing a lot of the work. He co-produced the documentary that she is very much featured in. We both went on a trip to LA, spent 4 days. I had headshots of her, including a clip from the documentary. And I could feel her telling me how she wants to be celebrated. I wrote the speech down, but I didn't even look at it after I wrote it. It just came out of my mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, um, I was finding myself saying, this is exactly what Retha is telling me to tell you all. So for some reason, I'm not looking at my own speech, but I hope you got the message. And then when I look at the pictures, I find myself talking to her. I'm actually saying, and now Jose is going to sing for you to pay tribute to your life on your new journey. And
Wow.
I felt it was a celebration of life, and I felt her there. So losing her, of course, was sad. No question. It felt devastating at first.
Mm-hmm.
But as the time has passed, I know she's happy. I feel it in my life. I mean, I feel it in my bones. So, and sometimes I find myself like with the recent situation with my cousin, I say, okay, Retha, I know this is what you want me to do. I find myself saying that.
That's
So,
wonderful. You have a mentor, a
yes,
spiritual mentor
yes,
who you
yes,
channel, who telepathically communicates. This is
yes,
amazing, Frank.
yes. Yeah. And I would say that, I do miss her. Like I miss my weekly phone calls to her. But I find myself saying, well, I can't call you, but I'll just talk to you. I mean,
Yes, indeed.
so I have learned a lot in terms of coping with that kind of loss. I mean, I have lost other people, other family members in the past, but it would be a 3 month or 4 month grieving process, and I still would not be comfortable about certain things. But in this particular case, I feel like all is well. I mean, so the big lesson learned is I'm more engaged with my spiritual side. And I guess going back to your earlier question, I do define my act of loving individuals. They have different levels depending on who they are. But when you love somebody enough that they are part of you even when they've passed,
Mm.
it's loving to me is also a form of identification.
Mm.
So on Frank About Health, I may talk about people who are unaware of their identities and therefore they become narcissistic. I've had, talks on narcissistic personality disorder, or people who um, are just traumatized based on other issues that have happened in their life, including ongoing health crises. There's still the fragmentation of their sense of awareness and their fear and their dread. But after an experience of knowing Retha, both in the past and posthumously, I've learned that that's what a lot of people probably lack in their life, to have a strong sense of self. I always say advocate for your healthcare, but you can only advocate when you have a strong sense of what your condition is, who you are, what motivates you. What
Mhm.
is your motivation in terms of the illness? Do you want to pass on, or do you want to live your life and fight? You know, a lot of people unfortunately don't ask themselves those questions. So Frank About Health will continue actually in Retha's memory. I think Retha wants me to continue the show. There were moments I thought maybe I should just stop, but no, it's therapeutic for me to do it. So
And
I
there's so much for you to share, Frank.
absolutely. And I know that there have been times when I've probably shared content that was erroneous or probably put people to sleep, but you can't have a perfect show every time.
We're not perfect,
We're
but
not perfect.
but I need to say that we need to go on a
Sure.
break. But when we come back, I want to hear, and I think our listeners want to hear about your documentary.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
Retha, so take it away. We're going to have a commercial now and be back to talk about the documentary.
Okay. See you in a few.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Hi, I'm Linda Marcanico. The A Train to Sedona is a memoir about my journey to love and compassion. It's also the name of my new broadcast on Wednesdays at 12 noon. When we are spiritual, we embrace possibilities and ideas, which strengthen our mind, body, spirit, health, and wisdom. On the A Train to Sedona broadcast, I plan to interview guests who embrace these expansive practices. Join us on Wednesdays at 12 noon on Talk Radio New York City.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the A Train to Sedona. I'm Linda Marcanico with my guest, Frank Harrison. And Frank, we really want to hear about your documentary.
Okay. Well, I can tell the title out loud at this point. It's called Being Frank for the Future of Healthcare.
Ooh.
Exactly. And I guess it talks about my life, but it also talks about the impact that Frank About Health. Oh my God, I've been corrected. It's Being Frank for a Healthy Future.
Thank you,
Okay.
Jess.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And you're absolutely right, because ironically, I'll be seeing my lawyer in a couple of weeks to get it all copywritten and trademarked before I release it. Now, one of the things that I was planning to do was release it in January. That was the reason for my original hiatus. But with the passing of Retha Gray, I had to get permission to feature her through the estate. At the same time, I also had to get the permission from her family, because her family was concerned that I guess anybody would be, that because of her profile that I could be capitalizing on her passing. When
Mhm.
you are a celebrity or an artist, sales go through the roof when you pass on.
Mm.
And I know that from the music industry. So the 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 case with Retha was a no-brainer. They loved the documentary coming out. They figured it would be a posthumous tribute to her. Um, Even her cousin, who worked with us on a previous documentary 10 years earlier, had thought maybe that I named the company, the production company, Healthy Media, after Retha. Even her manager thought that. And I thought, well, to be honest with you, I think, based on our last segment and how I told you the influence she had on my spiritual life in the last 3 months, I think I'm going to take Frank About Health in that direction, like something that would be Retha approved, or do I know this content is suitable? I have to be more selective because I unfortunately, in my mistakes, had discovered certain guests that were not forthright with me. And as a result, I've decided to be more disciplined in my approach towards selecting them
Mhm.
and exactly do it like if I was an agent trying to book someone on a commercial or on a television show. But that in itself became no, they don't want the company named after her, even though it was their idea, because unfortunately, with any estate, there are family members that like to get their share. So,
Yes.
for the best interest of Retha and me, they said just make sure that I work with the manager on any revenues driven by the documentary. So, that being said, another reason why I am delaying the release is because I'm going to repurpose it to be more reflective of those guests that had impact on the show and its future of advocacy. The way it was originally produced involved partners that are really not going to do me justice going forward. So I have to really question that. And hopefully, with my attorneys that I'll be meeting,
Yeah.
they'll be giving me their guidance as to what the next steps will be. So even though I know we got a comment that it was a long time ago, doesn't matter. With Retha in it, it'll be present day,
It'll
even
be
if it was done.
timeless. It'll be
It'll be
time.
timeless. Exactly.
And
Exactly.
remember, Frank, you are in a position to receive ongoing communication that makes it very timely.
Exactly. Exactly. I feel it. I feel it. I totally agree. So the documentary, though, has multi-purposes. It's not just to share the story. It's also to, um, pay tribute to Retha for sure. It's also to show the value that talkradio.nyc has provided, not just to me, but all the other people that are featured in it, because they were very influential in creating the longevity, the through line of the health part of my name, the show's name, rather.
Mhm.
As I said, it began as Frank About Epilepsy, and then I was able to branch out into mental health. But for me to get involved in other issues that I don't even relate to or have experience with, that couldn't have been done if it wasn't for those guests, you yourself included. Of course, you weren't part of the network at the time, so you're not featured in it, but who knows, with AI and other things, maybe we can add you in. We'll see. We'll see. But that is part of my hiatus. It's not just to obviously regroup and regather my focus, but also to take an existing product that no, you will not have to make more edits. Don't worry. Uh I just gotta no, don't worry.
We have to let our listeners know that we are getting messages from the engineer who is the editor. Can I
Correct.
recite that?
Yes, you can.
Do not make me make more edits.
Sir. No worries. There is artificial intelligence, and I've already been able to coordinate things so that if there are edits required or needed, it's it's going to be instant. It's not going to be the way things were. Again, there was an unfortunate circumstance with the partner behind the documentary, and that was Hilton. Hilton is semi-involved, but it's very interesting how uh they provide me with funding and a
Oh,
window to produce a product, proof of concept, but they pull back when we have a new elected president. So that's an issue not for another show.
Oh,
But it also tells you that you use your spirit and not let it get interfered by people who don't have the spirit.
yes, yes. Now we have just a few minutes before
Sure.
we end this wonderful, friendly discussion. Would you tell us when you're coming back more formally now and how people can reach you should they wish to?
Okay, well, if they want to reach me personally, my email is, excuse me, frankrharrison1@gmail.com. Or simultaneously, they can look at my website, www.frankrharrison.com. And simultaneously, there is a talkradio.nyc YouTube page that features a catalog of 83 of the 133 shows that I have done, including those with Retha Gray and you. And that's simply on YouTube, Talk Radio. Look at Frank About Health and the playlist. But in terms of when I'm formally coming back, I've been toying around ideas and stuff, but I'm involved in negotiations with a top-notch medical professional who I'm going to get very involved with in moving forward so that I really become a true healthcare advocacy platform. So based on my meetings with him and timeliness of everything that needs to be prepared, I am aiming for the first Thursday in April. So that would be
Okay.
April 3rd, I believe, from 5 to 6 p.m.
Wonderful. And
Mhm.
Frank, any last words, anything you want to leave with our listeners?
Take the F train to spirituality, which is using the influence of this particular show, the A train to Sedona, and using your own life experiences and your instincts and your advocacy of your life, your quality of life. Use all of those tools and come up with a map for your future. That's what my train conducts. Whether it's tapping into this show or tapping into the Conscious Consultant Hour, which is on Thursdays from 12 to 1, or whether it's tapping on to Frank About Health when I return, I want everyone to be aware that these shows are for you to help integrate into your life. And as you hopefully have heard through the last half hour, especially, I have been able to use my show and use my appearance on this show to tell how the passing of Retha Gray has helped me integrate my journey to be more aware of my intuition, more aware of my spiritual senses, and more aware that it is those senses that allow you to love as fully as possible.
Beautifully said, Frank. Thank you
Thank you.
so much. What a joy to have you with us. And I
Same.
want to say that next week, my guest will be Amanda Beth Johnson, who is a healer and a life coach. I hope to see you next week. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.